Hello and welcome to the Unwanted special review of the Game of Thrones prequel, The House of Dragons. This is a full Season 1 spoiler-full review of the show. So if you haven't seen it yet, don't bother listening because this is going to be a quick overall review of what we thought of the show. I'm joined here with my good friend Kyle.
Hi.
Hi Kyle, how you doing?
I'm good. So yeah, let's get ready. I'm excited.
Yes, House of Dragons. So, like I said before the show, I was talking to Kyle. I was like, Kyle, you know more about this than me. The guy's actually reading the what's it called? The Blood and
Fire and Blood.
Fire and Blood. He's actually reading the book, guys. So he is
listening. I'm audible.
Let's
not push it here, by the way, okay?
So he knows he's more well versed in this world than me. So I'm gonna hand over to
I'm gonna have to be careful here because book wise, I'm probably on. I would imagine season 3 material, so I'm gonna make sure that I don't spoil anything here.
Know where you're at. Okay.
I know where I'm at.
What was this season about then, Kyle?
This season basically is setting up the Dance of the Dragons, okay? Where we get introduced in the first episode to 3 Targaryens. We have Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, played by Eve Best. We have at the time, it was just Viserys, the first Targaryen, played by the amazing Paddy Considine. And we then get met to the old king, Jaehaerys, at the start. And what at the start is, basically this is introducing the whole key concept where beforehand, the king dies, it goes to the first male son. Okay? And then what you have here is an issue of, right, is it the firstborn that gets the rights?
Yes. Or
is it the first male next in line descendant? Where technically, by birthright, Eve's best. Which one's she? Rhaenyra?
I know all the names. The names of this show.
Rhaenys.
Yes.
Her character Rhaenys is technically, you would say conventionally, next in line for the throne.
Yes.
But Viserys is chosen because he's the male out of the two. Okay. We then get introduced to King's Landing. The Targaryens are at their height. Dragons are, we've got lots of dragons. Everything's good in the world. In the book, it is said that the reign of Viserys is considered one of the more peaceful reigns. In King's Landing.
It's labelled as the King of Peace or something like that.
So it's really meant to push this idea. And he has a child, Rhaenyra Targaryen.
Yep.
And the first episode, now obviously guys, this is a full spoiler review because we all know Game of Thrones, spoilers happen all the time. We really need to get past this. And
well, actually, I'm going to spoil this for everyone. Everyone dies because it's set 172 years before Game of Thrones, guys. So I don't know what to tell you.
That is true.
172 years before Daenerys is born.
If anybody wants to know how the show ends, they actually mention it in Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah.
Just saying. But yeah, so Daenerys' first wife, and I can't remember her name, but she was his cousin, and Rhaenyra's actual mother dies during the first episode of childbirth, and the son didn't make it. So at the time, Viserys' heir was his brother, Daemon Targaryen, played by the amazing Matt Smith. Okay?
Fantastic.
And basically, there's a whole uproar, and Viserys names his daughter Rhaenyra Targaryen as the heir to the Iron Throne. Now, what happens then is a lot of classic Game of Thrones conspiracies, fights, because what happens
political intrigue, all that stuff,
we get basically 2 families where the king remarries, and he remarries to Rhaenyra's best friend, Alicent Hightower, whose father, Sir Otto Hightower, played by, is it?
Rhys Evans,
yes. Who's the hand of the king, fantastic character, and they start having children, and everybody starts having children, and it's so convoluted. But anyway, basically the show is setting up a big civil war between
the families.
The Blacks,
a big family dispute.
The Blacks, which is Rhaenyra and her side, and the Greens, which is Alicent Hightower and her side. So that's basically, this season is really setting everything up. I feel it's setting up the war.
It's a big build up for this war, exactly.
But I guess I want to ask you, Lewis, actually, I was going to ask you, first of all, because in contradiction, I would say, to especially the first season of Game of Thrones, maybe not the later season of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Time goes by quite quickly in this season.
Oh yes, there's a lot of time jumps in this.
Where
yeah.
before in season 1 of Game of Thrones, it's maybe 2 episodes till you get somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing time jumps of 10, 6 years, you know?
Yeah.
I want to ask, how did you feel these time jumps were handled?
Pretty well, actually, yeah. I mean, you and I watched the show very differently. I watched it all within a week, like I do with my shows. I'm a guy who likes to binge. I'm a guy. The weekly stuff, I get too frustrated, man. I need to see it all, so I usually wait till most of it's out and then I watch it all. So I wait till 9 days out and start watching it. And you watched it weekly, so you and I had a very different experience.
I did watch it weekly, and I have to say, I really enjoyed watching it weekly. To be honest, I have to say,
yeah.
I think it just worked well.
I enjoyed it as well. I think the time jumps work really well because they're handled really brilliantly, I think, because you have it sets up so like the first one I think is only like 6 months, and I think it just works and just, you know, keeping the story tight. You aren't confined to like a certain period or anything like that. They want to obviously it's good because it's setting up the stakes and the drama especially between Alicent and Rhaenyra.
Yeah,
and it's slowly building, Rhaenyra, sorry, and building that up over time, and obviously reaching that big climactic moment in the final episode where, you know, Rhaenyra's son dies and boom, war is about to start.
Lucerys, yes.
So, so I think that what was I saying? Did I say Rhaenyra or Rhaenyra?
Rhaenyra. I know it's too confusing. Yeah. I think I have to start by saying, just on the point of the characters, the casting.
Yes.
Oh, I'm happy. I was in love.
Fantastic.
I mean,
Everyone does a fantastic job.
You know, I was mentioning this to you, Lewis, because obviously by the time you were watching it, the big time jump, as in the jump between the old cast for Rhaenyra and Alicent to the new cast, and I was very much in the boat where, you know, you got used to these characters, like, oh, you know, I don't want them to go. I really like them. I don't know if I'll like the new characters, and I'm a huge. I love Olivia Cooke. I think she's really good. Actress, and I didn't know much about Emma Darcy. No, I would not go back. I mean, the young cast were great. Don't get me wrong, but I think the story and these characters really, the actors are so goddamn good. And I mean, my overall favorite performance has to go to Paddy for Viserys.
Yeah, Paddy's great. Paddy is fantastic.
Incredible. Yeah. I mean, you know, his decline for the episodes is always something really interesting.
Yeah.
And that was like,
I think
fun moments.
Overall, like, I mean, I think like most people, when this thing was announced, I was like, I couldn't care less. Like, everyone had been really burned by the way the Game of Thrones ended.
Yeah, the ending of season 8.
Yeah, that was bad. So I think when they announced this, they were like, everyone on Twitter and social media, that was like, oh, who cares? No one's going to watch this and stuff. But obviously, people tuned in, and I actually think they did overall, I thought it was a really solid show and a great first season. I'm really invested in all these characters. I'm really invested in where the story's going to go now. I really love how it's definitely more that old school Game of Thrones where it's, you know, the early seasons where it's all political, really no spectacle, really, in this first season in terms of big battles. There's that one in episode 3.
The Battle of the Tides, which is mentioned so briefly in the book.
Yeah.
You know, that I kind of go, well, they made a whole thing about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, as the seasons go on, there is more to come. Don't get me.
I think because also
you will get some of that stuff, but you're right in saying that the political side and basically the foundations and the groundwork of this story was laid so perfectly well that I'm just so buzzing to see it continue.
I think also because there's also that part of HBO where they're obviously like, well, we don't know how well this is going to be received. It's actually in a way a bit of a risk because they're like, well, we're not going to give it as much of a huge budget like we did in the later series of Game of Thrones. We'll give it like a lesser budget and we'll see how well this sort of does. And we're just solely rely on character interactions and writing and inner conflicts. Conflicts? That's not a word. Conflicts. And that's where the best stuff in Game of Thrones always was. It wasn't really although there was some fantastic spectacle.
Yeah, there is.
The
Some
best stuff
really
in Game
good
of Thrones
fights,
was
but
always the backstabbing, the political intrigue, the personal conflicts, the family conflicts. That's where the heart of that show was, and that's where this show focuses in and succeeds.
you
I
know,
think.
it's really good, and I don't think you need to see Game of Thrones to watch this.
Nope,
I think it
absolutely
helps.
Mhm.
Just because it's nice. It's funny now, being a Game of Thrones fan, watching this, and you go, "Oh, these are the Lannisters," and you're like, "Ah, yes, I know who you are." You're just kind of
Yeah.
understanding every
Mhm.
faction. I have to say,
Yeah.
on talking about the budget
Mhm.
for a show called House of the Dragons,
Yeah.
I do feel the CGI of the dragons was fairly was fairly good overall.
It was decent, yeah.
You know, like, I was kind of worried because I was like, that's a lot of big dragons to have on screen at at times, and
Yeah.
I was like, me, CGI police over here.
Yeah.
But I was overall, I was actually kind of like, you handled it fairly well,
Yeah,
especially with
absolutely.
the kind of lower budget.
It's
compared to
also
Game of Thrones.
interesting. It's also interesting to see his return to the Game of Thrones universe in quite a different way. Like it feels much more. This isn't a criticism of the Game of Thrones show or the books or anything. Like, just this, they're two different shows. This is far more focused in on one group of people, whereas
you're
Game of
very
Thrones
right.
obviously had people all over the Westeros and even into Essos and things like that. This is like purely focused on King's Landing, and occasionally like you get
It's focused on one family.
yeah,
Dragonstone.
it's entirely Dragonstone. Thank you.
Or
And you
or,
get,
or
like,
Driftmark.
Driftmark. Thank you.
You're right in saying, the Sea Snake.
Mhm,
He was
it's-
excellent.
Yeah,
He was a brilliant
fantastic.
character. I think he's getting a spin-off show. I saw.
Really? Are they doing?
J.R.
Yeah,
Martin.
we'll get to that at the end of the review about
Yeah,
what
we'll
else
get into
they're
that
doing,
later. But
mm.
I know you're right in saying that these guys. This really follows the two sides of the family.
Yeah.
Which I really love, because before, with the old Game of Thrones, you're like, these characters have never crossed paths.
Mhm.
Yeah, at the moment, in early seasons. But with these guys, you're like, right, they all know each other. This is kind of a wee bit more contained, and you can kind of follow it a lot easier, I think.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Because you
I
aren't
think it's
going
really
all
good.
over the place. Yeah.
Exactly, you're not going over the place. But I mean, so before you jump in between the future sequels and everything, I wanted to ask you,
Mhm.
what scene from this,
Mhm.
like the whole show, what was like, if you had to think of like a memorable scene, not being like
Mhm.
as in it could have been shocking, it could have been
Mhm.
amazing or something. What scene really stood
Yeah.
out for you from the season one?
Oh, there's a lot of great ones actually. That's a hard question. I really liked actually the wedding. The wedding between Rhaenyra and her cousin. Rhaenyra,
Oh,
sorry, and her
the very
cousin.
traditional High Valyrian sort of wedding.
Yes, and where like things get out of control there, and it's just all the looks and like everyone's giving each other
Yeah,
daggers and things like that. I
yeah,
like that scene.
yeah.
I really liked one of Paddy Considine's near last scenes when they're having that dinner.
That was a tense scene.
quite
I have
quite
to
tense,
say.
and obviously he just wants them all to get along because he loves them all, and it's like really sad because obviously he's gonna die in the next scene. That was a really standout one. I loved both like the Dragonstone conflicts, the one where Rhaenyra goes to get her egg back from Daemon, sorry. And then the second time around, where it's like the parallel of that scene where she's joined on Daemon's side
when
to
Otto
go against
Hightower
the
comes.
yeah, exactly.
That
But no,
was
there's
really good
there's a bunch of standout stuff in this. There's a lot of great scenes in this.
I have
What
to
about you?
say, for me, the standout scene,
Mhm.
which I think is probably for not negative, it's just a hard hitting scene,
Mhm.
is now this is going to be a challenge for names. It's Lena or Lana Valerian. So the
Mhm.
sea snake's daughter,
Yes.
who was Daemon's
Oh
second wife.
yeah.
When
yeah.
she basically has a failed labor and she knows
Mhm.
she's going to die, she goes down and she just yells her Karis at her own dragon
Yeah.
because she wants to die a rider's death.
Mhm.
And I remember sitting there and I was like,
Oh.
bloody hell, like this
Mhm.
is that was something that kind of threw me. This threw me because, as I was saying to you before, the book is told in a textbook fashion where they
Yeah.
talk about accounts. So the
Yes.
show has a really great liberty to
Mhm.
change things around because
Yeah.
she definitely did not tell her dragon to burn her in the book. So I was like,
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going, oh, I know what's going to happen to this character. No, I don't. I know their fate. I do not know how they're going to go. And I mean, Luke Harris's last scene. See that whole with Luke versus Aemond,
and the dragon riding. Yeah.
It was in the dragon. It was that scene when he's looking at where you got Luke's tiny dragon, and then the shadow of the big
quite
boy.
Scary, actually.
That was quite scary. And then the big final moments for Luke, I was actually kind of upset. I was like, oh,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, overall, I'm so glad with this show.
This is definitely a big pleasant surprise for me as someone who wasn't really excited for the show at all. It even felt like they kind of got me. Like, see, as soon as like we're back in King's Landing and stuff like that, I was like, oh, I have kind of missed this.
You're like that.
But I really
of everybody who's really like, I will not let them disappoint me. And then as soon as you see the title sequence, you're like, yes, Game of Thrones, baby.
But what's great about this is, look, the whole lore has been written out. They have to follow. They know exactly where this has to end. They have like 4 seasons as the plan, I think.
Yes, that is. It's 4 seasons, 10 episodes. Now, when you said earlier how when the show got announced, you were a bit worried. You're like, oh, I don't know. As soon as I heard that it was based off of the whole season is already written out, I was like, right, I'm okay.
Yeah,
I'm quite happy.
Yeah. And George R. R. Martin's back being quite involved in this project, whereas in the latter portions of the Game of Thrones seasons,
they've lost one
them.
showrunner.
Oh,
there was 2 showrunners and they've lost one. I know of right at the moment.
Damn. Well, at least George R. R. Martin is producing, and he didn't give up. He's not going to give up. Hopefully, like he did in after series, was it 5 or something? Game of Thrones, he stopped. I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously they didn't have enough material.
Well, what would you give? What's your overall score for season 1 of the House of Dragons?
I mean, it's a solid 8, pushing 9. I would say.
Right. Okay.
Top tier. Like, I could easily sit down right now and rewatch episodes 1 to 10 in one sitting. I think because I'm so invested in the characters. I love to see how the story progresses. It'd be really, it's just interesting to kind of, the whole thing with Game of Thrones is the Game of Thrones universe, whatever you want to call it, is that I think once you know what's happening, rewatching it, you pick up more.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I feel it's just so good and rewatchable. I would give it an 8.
Yeah.
8.8 or 9. I don't know.
Okay. I'd have to agree with you. I'd give it a solid 8 as well. I just loved, like I said, all the family conflicts, the political stuff. This is the stuff that I really cared about in Game of Thrones, and the stuff that was the most interesting. And yeah, pretty much from the get-go, I was pretty invested in all this stuff. All the characterization's great. I love how off the rails and unpredictable Daemon is. Paddy Considine was fantastic. The whole cast, everyone's great. Everyone commits to the roles fantastically.
Have you seen
it's a
the
good,
comments
solid show
from the producers saying they don't understand why everybody loves Daemon?
Yeah, because he's a bastard. Because he's so unpredictable. He's a terrible guy.
He is a terrible character, and everybody's like, I don't know why you like him. Like, I genuinely don't. Like, why? And I found that very funny because Matt Smith is just quite charming in any role he'll do, even in Morbius.
But before we kind of head off, is there any more Game of Thrones shows they're actually planning to do next?
No,
because I'm unaware.
So this is where you kind of get. Well, we've got a sequel show in the works.
Oh,
this? It's the
Jon Snow one.
Yes, the Jon Snow sequel show or whatever. And it's, I mean, there's nothing much kind of confirmed about that at the moment. I'm just getting up a list here because I want to go through because I know we're getting an animated show. So we've got the Jon Snow sequel.
Yeah.
Tales of Dunk and Eggs, apparently.
Oh, yeah, that's a book.
That's a book. There's an animated sequel, which I don't know what is kind of based off of. So, here we go. So, 9 Voyages, which is the Cloris Valerian Sea Snake sequel, spin-off series. And I think that's going to fall... I don't know if that's going to follow him kind of side by side of House of Dragons.
Yeah.
The 10,000 Ships, which is another one which is kind of set even more in the past.
And there's so much they can explore. It's really interesting. The one that's really bizarre to me is they're doing that Jon Snow one. That's quite interesting.
I wonder. I don't know. This is a case of them kind of going, right, could we try and fix what we
That's
did
what
here?
I'm thinking. It's like we kind of need to fix what Game of Thrones is, because if they start off with Jon Snow and the whole series focuses on him and the wildlings, they could, and it's successful. They could then make a sequel series.
I know,
to Game of
because here's
Thrones
the thing,
entirely.
like, oh, we're gonna focus on Jon Snow and the wildlings. Like, yeah, but the biggest threat to them, those
It's
guys just
dead.
died. Like, they're dead.
Yeah,
Like, you can't, you know, and obviously, the wall's not too far from
it's
Winterfell,
from
so you can
Winterfell,
see
yeah,
Sansa Stark's Queen of the North.
so cool.
There's
But there's
so
also-
many opportunities, but I'm
There was
really
also
happy
that-
with focusing on the Dance of the Dragons.
Yeah, I hope
What
they
were
just
you
you know.
saying?
Sorry, I was just going to talk about that the Long Night series that got cancelled after that pilot. They made a pilot, like a really expensive pilot, and then they patched it.
That's what. Who was in that? Was that?
I think it was either was it Nicole Kidman or Naomi Watts?
Yeah, I think it was
I think
Naomi
it was
Watts.
Naomi.
Do you know
Naomi
what?
Watts,
I
yeah,
was thinking
was
that
in
the
it.
exact. I was like,
Uh.
I was thinking, was it Naomi Watts? I was like, no, she was too busy at AMC.
Yeah, it was Naomi Watts was part of that, and then a really expensive show and pilot, and then
30
they just
million.
30 million for that episode, and they just went, nope, we're not doing that. I want to know what that looked like.
Jeez.
I want to know what happened there. But anyway, I guess that'll wrap up a review for the House of Dragons, the Game of Thrones prequel series. Guys, tell us what you guys thought of the show in the comments below. I'd like to know. I'd like to see what everyone's thinking. And thank you very much, Kyle, for joining me today.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Of course. And so please, guys, as do all that usual stuff, like and subscribe to the channel. And if you don't know already, we also run a weekly podcast that's available on the YouTube channel as well as Spotify. We try and get them up every Wednesday or Thursday. But yes, those were just our opinions of the House of Dragon. But at the end of the day, those were just our unwanted opinions. Thank you very much.